Say hello to my little friend Buffy. She can't slay vampires, but boy, can she make a guitar shine. Unlike a lot of other YouTube channels out there, I don't offer channel subscriptions, nor do I have a Patreon page. Content creators like to use these options as a way to earn money while offering exclusive content to their paid subscribers. In other words, if you pay to play, you get extra information that non-paying viewers won't get to see. I want all of my content to be available to everyone. As a result, I would really appreciate it if you would consider clicking the thumbs up button for this and any of my videos that you watch. Also, be sure to comment, subscribe, and share my videos with everyone on the internet. And if you would like to support my channel financially, you can click the thanks button down below and leave a tip. You can also buy a t-shirt or guitar plants from my YouTube merch shelf that's displayed below the description for this video. If you don't see that merch shelf, there's also a link in the description. Let's keep the content available to everyone, not just the elites. Now on with the video. In the last episode, I conducted what I call the initial assembly. I call it initial because it's not actually the final assembly. That's going to come later. I like to do an initial assembly to make sure that all the parts and components are going to fit properly and work correctly. The reason that that's so important is because that initial assembly can be kind of rough on the finish of a guitar. So I like to do it before I get to the point where I'm ready to level sand, polish sand, and buff the guitar, which is what's going to happen in this episode. And once that's been completed, in the next episode, I'll do the final assembly. So let's jump in and get started. The level sanding process will start by using Eagle Abrasive's P400 grit sandpaper, which I've wrapped around a small rubber eraser. And I'll sand in a circular fashion, which is the most aggressive way and removes material very quickly. And periodically I'll stop, wipe off the surface, and then I'm going to check my progress by looking at the surface against a bright light like my LED shop light. And that will help me to gauge how quickly I'm leveling the surface. And what I'm looking for is I want an even, consistent matte sheen across the entire surface. That's what the surface looked like when it was just sprayed. This is how the initial sanding looks, and this is what the surface looks like after I have finished with the 400 grit. As you can see, it goes from that textured glossy finish to a speckled glossy finish to a matte sheen. And what I'm trying to do is get the entire surface a consistent matte sheen. This initial level sanding process is the most labor-intensive part of the whole process. It takes quite a bit of time and a lot of elbow grease to accomplish a nicely leveled surface. I like to work in small sections at a time, so I'll divide up the front like into quarter quadrants and work each section. Then I'll make my way around the perimeter of the guitar in the same way. And I'll just continue to sand until each one of those sections is completely level. Then I'll move on to the next one. P400 grit is a pretty aggressive grit to level sand with, and that's why I will frequently stop to check my progress. And as soon as I've removed any shiny spots and have the surface completely level, I can stop. And this is what the surface looks like after I have finished level sanding with the P400. It's very smooth, there's no longer any texture, and I can start to see some reflection. To begin the process of polish sanding, I'm going to switch over to Super Acelix and Super Bufflex sanding sheets, and I'll sand from 600 grit all the way up to 3000. The goal with polish sanding is to remove and replace the scratches left by the previous grit with progressively finer scratches. So What I'm doing here is I'm removing those 400 grit sanding scratches and replacing them with 600 grit sanding scratches. Now the Super Acelix is a very efficient sanding abrasive. As a result, I can very quickly replace those 400 grit scratches with the 600 grit scratches. Then once I'm done with that, I'll move to 800 and repeat that process, and I'll continue all the way up through all the Super Acelix grits, which go up to 1500 grit. Then I'll switch to the Super Bufflex, and that continues with 2000, 2500, and then finishes with 3000 grit. The sanding technique that I use for polish sanding is pretty much the same as what I use for level sanding. I'm just going to sand in a circular pattern, working one section at a time. And once I finish that section, I'll move on to the next section. And what I'm looking for as I check my progress is I want to make sure that I've got the entire surface or the area that I'm working in covered in a consistent scratch pattern that's associated with the grit that I'm sanding with. So I want to replace that coarser 400 grit scratch pattern with a slightly finer 600 grit scratch pattern, and so on until I get all the way to 3000 grit. So what I have to do is periodically stop while I'm sanding and check the condition of the surface by holding the guitar up against a bright light at a low angle. And if I see any scratches that stand out, I know I need to keep working in that area. After I've finished polish sanding with the Super Bufflex 3000 grit, I'm ready to start buffing the guitar with my buffing machine. And what I'm using here is a soft cotton flannel wheel. And the polishing compound I'm using is Menzerna's 204 pre-polish. And what this does is it will bring up the initial shine. It's not a perfect shine, but it's pretty darn close. And it's going to remove even the finest scratches that still remain on the surface that were left over from sanding with that 3000 grit. And I'll just work the body in sections just like when I was sanding. And I will periodically recharge the wheel with the compound, and I'll just continue working. And I make sure to keep moving the body against the surface of the buffing wheel. I don't want to linger in one spot out of fear that I could burn through. And then if necessary, I can switch from using 2 buffing wheels down to 1 buffing wheel so that I can get into some of the harder to reach areas like inside the cutaways on the guitar body. After buffing, I'll hang up the guitar to let it cool down because buffing causes frictional heat, which softens the surface. And before I wipe off the residue, I want to make sure that it has cooled down to room temperature. To bring out the highest level of gloss shine, I'm going to switch to another set of cotton flannel buffing wheels, but this time I'm going to be using Menzerna's P175 ultra fine polishing compound. And this is what's going to really bring up that mirror-like high gloss shine. And like I did with the coarse compound, I'll let the guitar hang up for 30 minutes after I finish buffing it, and then I can wipe off any remaining residue left over by the compound. From there, you can see what that shine now looks like. Pretty amazing. And of course, I like to do the window test, and this is what helps me to see how perfectly formed my reflections are. So that's the technique that I use to achieve a high gloss mirror-like shine. There are probably other ways that you could do it using hand buffing techniques, but I learned a long time ago that a buffing machine is really the way to go when you want to achieve that level of high quality finish where the shine is incredibly reflective and there are no fine scratches that can appear wherever the light reflects off the surface of the guitar. So what it comes down to is if you want a professional finish, you need professional type tools to achieve that finish. So as I said, in the next episode, I'm going to be doing the final assembly of the guitar, and that should be the last episode in this series, making the 4-string bass guitar. So until then, as always, take care, stay safe, and I'll see you soon.